Welcome to the first of an intended series of podcasts that highlight the authors of articles from the Cricket Statistician. I am Russ Houldin, the successor editor of the Cricket Statistician to Jonathan Northall as of January this year. This idea was suggested by Rodney Ulliott, who's the ACS's master of all things internet and many other things. I am so pleased that Douglas Miller and David Frith have agreed to take part. The inspiration for this podcast is Douglas' superb tribute to MGK Smith's recent passing in the August issue of the Cricket Statistician. Reading the tribute, the thought that occurred to me was that Smith's career marked a kind of watershed in post-World War II cricket. He was among the last amateur captains. Douglas has pointed out to me he wasn't the actual last. I believe it was Colin Cowdrey. But in the talking about in the 63, 64 sort of area there. And he was certainly the last person to play both rugby union and cricket for his country. So again, my thought was I would love to be a fly on the wall to overhear a conversation between David and Douglas on this idea. And I can't think of any two people better placed to reflect on the profound changes in cricket before and after Mike Smith's playing days. Douglas, as many of you know, is a distinguished writer on cricket, a veteran umpire, and a very active member of the ACS. He has written about how he got the cricket bug going to a county match between Lancashire and Somerset in 1946. Since then, he's authored several biographies of cricketers, notably, as I mentioned, on MJK Smith, a book on the grounds of Gloucestershire, and articles and book reviews in the ACS Journal and elsewhere, too numerous to itemize. His most recent article was in the August 2025 issue reviewing the progress of the Decision Review System, or DRS. He became a member of ACS in the 1990s and has served as chair of the ACS committee. Turning to David Frith, he is one of the most celebrated of writers on cricket, without a doubt. In 2003, for example, he won the Cricket Society Book of the Year for the third time. His book, Bodyline Autopsy, won the 2010 Cricket Web Award for Book of the Decade. David was born in England, but his family moved to Australia in 1947. He moved back to England in 1964, and after another spell in Australia in 1971, moved to England on, I think, a more permanent basis the following year. He edited The Cricketer from 1973 to 1979, when he founded Wisden Monthly, acting as editor until 1996. His most recent article in the ACS Journal was in August 2024, a piece on Scott Ledger's injury tribulations in a match in 1978, where he was injured 3 times in the same day. And that article mentions the creation of Wisden Monthly. Now, acting as my self-designated fly on the wall, I would begin the conversation by asking Douglas and David in turn their thoughts on how cricket has changed before and after Mike Smith. I would hope for a free-flowing conversation from this point, but I have some specific questions that might arise, and we'll get to those. So perhaps Douglas, you could begin with your reflections.
Well, I think that the first thing is that there was the demise of the amateur, which was so dear to the hearts of many at MCC, and rather against the flow. Finally, the amateur came to an end after the 1962 season, and Mike Smith, by that time, had been captain of Warwickshire for 4 or 5 years, and he would have been a rather different kind of captain from some of the people who were parachuted in, because great importance was attached to having an amateur. Whether he knew anything about the game came second. He would know how to circulate the port and so forth. That was considered important. At Warwickshire, it was a different situation. They positively wanted him. They positively welcomed him. And he was also a person who was not from one of the snooty, for want of a better word, and I wish I could think of a better one, public schools. He went to the modest public school of Stamford, which has since produced Shan Massoud, amongst other people. And he went up to Oxford, but only after he'd actually been rejected by Cambridge. Otherwise, it would have been yet another of the fine string of Cambridge players, all of whom I think at some stage or other captained their counties. And I think that without exactly using a phrase like one of the lads, I think that the professionals felt that there was less of a gulf with Mike than there had been with, for instance, Ted Dexter operating under the Duke of Norfolk and married to someone who was earning a full crust on the side as a model, and with an ordained clergyman in the side. There were all sorts of features that really had changed. I mean, I think even by the time Mike Smith took the next tour out, it would have been quite unthinkable that you could have had a vicar in the team. I don't know what your thoughts are, David, on all that.
I don't have a lot to do with MJK Smith, but when I was with him, I detected that he was a number one cricket man. I remember I was seeking autographs in Sydney. He welcomed me into the England dressing room. Not many England cricketers, captains, would have done such a thing. So yes, I met him a number of times, and I can picture a catch he took on the boundary at backwards square leg at Lord's in a Test match, or
in 1972?
Probably, yeah.
And he caught Ian Chappell. And I thought that was the most spectacular catch. Well, we'll think that less nowadays with people diving around all over the place. Yeah. But Mike himself told me he always knew he was going to catch it. And catch it he did. Mm-hmm. And in that series, when he came back as a specialist batsman, he had a string of useful scores in the 30s, but not enough to command a place beyond the third test. But he didn't do too badly when a lot of other people were not doing too well at all.
I always thought of Smith as someone who was both a good short fielder and outfielder. It sticks in my mind. I might have got that he was actually a rather excellent cover and mid-wicket fielder. In addition to, I think Douglas has mentioned it in the obituary, many catches in the short leg position. So that was quite unusual, I thought.
I think he spent a lot of time at short leg. He said he only got hurt once, which is food for thought, the way they all pad up and protect their heads and all parts of the anatomy nowadays. But he was, I think, a real athlete. And a lot of people find it difficult to come to terms with how he managed all that with very poor sight. I mean, as a rugby player, his sight was actually, where obviously he couldn't wear his glasses, his sight was distinctly poor. And I think that it's probably accepted that that didn't help him at the start of innings against extreme pace. Particularly, I can think of when he was done by Charlie Griffith, and he was one of the people who said something different happened with Charlie's arm, and in his view, he was chucking it.
That's what I think. That's because to me, it's no minor feat to have been picked to play fly half for England. It's an extremely athletic position, and I think that spilled over into his fielding.
Yes, he was just a very good athlete, and he and Alwyn Brace, as he was known, at scrum half, really rewrote the tactics of rugby and did the unorthodox. And in his one match for England, he was paired up with Dickie Jeeps, who he didn't know from Adam. And as he told me, he never met him again after that match, which I found rather surprising. Yeah. And Dickie Jeeps was a pretty orthodox scrum half and just didn't give the kind of service he would have had he been playing for Wales, where his partner Brace was their scrum half.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, it brings back great memories for me of actually that great Welsh team of that era. You might recall Gareth Edwards was later, a little bit later on, the scrum half, and what he was noticeable for was the extreme length that he could throw his passes. He used a spin pass, which is something that's commonplace in North American football, but not so much in rugby union. The rugby union ball is slightly bigger than an NFL ball, but so that gave the great Barry John a lot more room than he might have had if Dickie Jeeps was servicing him.
Absolutely. Now, I'm no expert on rugby, so don't pursue that line too far. But absolutely, I think any of us could say that.
Yeah. So you pick out the change from gentlemen and players to what we're now totally familiar with as everyone is a professional. David, what does anything stand out to you over that long period that really marks the most significant change in the game?
Test cricket, which I must admit is for me the most important area of the whole game, has changed beyond belief because of the number of new countries coming in. And sometimes you wonder if it was justified. Were they ready for it? You could argue that for most of the cricket countries, I suppose. But if they don't develop in the years that follow, then clearly they were admitted purely for financial reasons. For me, there's only one thing that matters, in all honesty: Ashes cricket. And almost all my writings have been devoted to England versus Australia and the players, the cavalcade of players who played in Ashes cricket, going right back to my hero, A.E. Stoddart. Drew Stoddart led England in the first great Test series, 1894-95. And that was actually something that helped me on my way as a cricket writer. But I've written a number of books, mostly on the subject of Ashes Test matches, and it's been a living. It's been almost an obsession, really.
Would you say that your book on Stoddart was the one that really set you on your way? I mean, I think you got a prize for that, as far as I can recall.
It won the first ever
Cricket
Society Book Award.
Yes,
which was very, very thrilling. I don't know. My first mainstream job was with the Cricketer in 1972, and I had a session with E.W. Swanton, and Jim was clearly giving me the third degree. And I'd recently, in Sydney, tracked down Jack Gregory, the great Australian all-rounder of the 1920s. He was a Keith Miller of his time, but he was a recluse. And I knocked on his door. I jumped in the car. I drove 140 miles, I think it was, and knocked on the door. And he said, "What do you want?" He was just going fishing. And if I'd stopped for petrol, I would have missed him. So these fateful moments have helped to shape my life in cricket, because I sent a piece on Jack Gregory over to England. Jim Swanton saw it, and when Debbie and I returned to England that following summer, somebody told me that the Cricketer were looking for a new editor. So I had the third degree from Jim Swanton, who he was very fatherly, actually. I was a bit worried about him, but he was good. He said at one point, "Who was Jimmy Riddell?" I think a name like that. And I said, he was the dressing room attendant at Lord's, thinking that I'd hit on a very obscure fact, and it wasn't. I got the wrong Jimmy. So anyway, having found Jack Gregory, that's what cracked it with Swanton, because as a schoolboy, Gregory, the greatest all-rounder in the world, that won him over. I didn't realise when I got in the car that day and drove well over 100 miles on the off chance of seeing him. But thank goodness I didn't stop for petrol, because I would have missed him.
That's interesting that Jim took to you. So, I mean, Shilberia, I read, lasted a week as his immense, whatever it is, and certainly he's made it in his own right. But no, you did very well.
Though, I published the first cricket article Shilberry ever offered on log bowling. He was still at Cambridge University.
Yes.
I don't know what he did to get into the game full time, but I know that I have to thank Jack Gregory.
Yes. And you're still the doyen of the whole business. You're the person to whom one turns.
It's kind of you, Douglas. Thank you. Warms an old man's heart.
Yes. Well, I don't think there's anybody that I would more quickly turn to agree or disagree with some particular point. I was just thinking, going back to the changes, that one of the other changes that first came in 1963 was when we had our first one-day competition. And each of these competitions, when it came in the first place, was regarded as a bit of a sort of hit and a giggle. And people were criticised for saving runs and not trying to take wickets and things like this, because we wanted to force it into the mould of first-class cricket. And then in the end, we've gone on through ODIs into T20, and now we're in the 100. We talked today of the counties that can't get into the 100 having their own competition of 10 overs a side. Or 50 balls, or whatever it's going to be. Hardly worth the money of going in.
A dozen, and have done with it. A dozen balls aside. Get it over here. Yes. No, I mean, Test cricket is something else, isn't it?
It is. It is.
It's just.
I don't know about you, David, but I think the one thing that I look back on my life, and I as a sort of 30-year-old, 40-year-old, or whatever, I'd said the one thing I want to do is to see Test cricket in Australia. And I've been to Australia now 3 times in that pursuit, and I've watched England play 16 different series abroad in all of the countries. I just regret I never got to New Zealand. Have you travelled that sort of all around those?
Yeah, I've been to all of them except Bangladesh.
Yes, I haven't done Bangladesh either.
New Zealand is a lovely place. It's so laid back, easy going. People are so kind. It's probably my favourite country.
Well, I was going to go there when there were 2 tours. This is another of the great changes, to have 2 teams come to this country. And then we go to at least 2 countries. In the winter, we play a bit of this and a bit of that. And now I was just going to say that I had my heart on going to New Zealand, and a friend of mine said, no, I tell you where I'm going to go this winter, and it's a really fascinating place, India. And off to India we went, and I've never regretted that. I've been to India 4 times.
I remember being in Colombo, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, as it is.
Yes.
For their first ever Test match, and that was a really momentous occasion. I forget the details of the game itself, but I remember looking across, and the gates opened, and out came the visiting side, and then Sri Lanka, Ceylon, stood on the Test match turf for the first time ever. I took a little picture of it and really felt excited at that moment. Of course, the more cricket you watch, the less excited you get, without discrediting Ashes cricket, which to me has been a lifeline. My life is framed by Ashes.
And we've had some wonderful theories during your lifetime, haven't we? I mean, 54
going out of my way to meet others who played in the earlier Test matches, like Charlie McCartney and Arthur Maley and Jack Gregory. There's quite a lot of them. I made a big effort to find them and go to see them. Jack Gregory didn't want to know, really. He'd been betrayed by a journalist back in 1921 or 26. So he'd not spoken to a journalist since then. And this was 1971. And I'm trying to interview him. Well, I disguised it as just a friendly chat. But as soon as I got home, I scribbled it all down while it was fresh in my mind. He was a giant of a cricketer. And Swanton thought so too, as a schoolboy. He was his number 1.
I've only really met one pre-war pure pre-war Test cricketer, and that was Andy Sandham. Somehow or other, I got asked to the launch of a book by Swanson, and Sandham was there. I offered him a lift back home to his flat, and he said, "Thank you very much," and signed the book. So
he was a lovely chap.
Yes.
I went to see him in his flat, and he talked about his 300 in the Caribbean, and he didn't say a lot. But when he finished, he just nodded and said, "There's the bat over there." And I don't have most of it anymore, but a huge cricket collection. And I regret not trying to buy that off him. But perhaps I felt that he loved it so much. He didn't have much left. He was widowed. He was old. But he had that bat. So if I paid him a couple of £100 for it and walked away with it, I think that would have been a crime. I collected plenty of other bats.
And I think it's true to say when he actually made that triple century, he didn't know it was a Test match. They made the decision a bit later. I think that's right.
Andy Sandham.
Yes.
Wasn't it in the Caribbean?
It was in the Caribbean, right? Was it not the same time as they were playing in New Zealand as well? And then they said they gave Test status to all of it. But I thought the match hadn't. It's actually not an important point, but there we are. Because my interest in cricket absolutely flares up in 1946 at the age of 8. And I think that's where it's so convenient that there have only been just over 270 Test matches altogether. There's now been, 2,700 or something, with all of these countries coming in, as you say. And how some youngster now can get his mind round all of that and the statistics and the great deeds and the great players and the rest of it. But it was manageable when I started.
It's a good point. Whether it's always been this way, I don't know. But it strikes me that your average young fella is not all that interested in what happened before he was born. Some, of course, but I think a very small percentage.
I think
obviously, they develop a love for the game, or the grounds would be empty. But I can remember being transfixed as early as 1947, where there were scratchy recordings or direct broadcasts from Australia. And of course, the following year was great 1948 Australian Tour of England.
Yes.
I remember standing on the railway bridge at Rayners Lane, and I saw a man open his newspaper, and splashed over the back page was England bowled out for 52. Ray Limmel took 6 for 20.
Years listening later, to the commentary on that.
I became a friend of Ray Limmel's, I'm proud to say.
Yes.
In a Poitevin Grey match in Sydney, I took 6 for 20 as we got Randwick out for 52. I'm still up in the clouds about that one. But Ray was a lovely chap. He gave me a lift home. I just said to him, I knew he lived near me in Sydney. I said, could I hop a lift with you? Ray, I live in Carlton. He said, sure, hop in. And we drove all the way around Botany Bay. And I'm trying to get him to talk about what had happened that afternoon. He didn't want to know. He wanted to switch off. He wanted to talk about geography and history. But it was a thrill to be with him. Later on, I got to know him very well. I was horrified to find him one morning at the Gabba drinking his second pint of beer when he'd been told that because he had diabetes, he had to cut the beer or drink a bare minimum,
Yes.
So he probably got through half a dozen that day. Dear Ray, he's a lovely chap.
I've never known the sort of breadth of people that you have, and certainly not Australians, but I did have a long-distance telephone call, which I much enjoyed with Alan Davidson when I was writing a book on Rahman Sabha Row.
Well, Dave was a gentleman.
But I did have a moment when I could say that I had visited the homes of England's 3 oldest cricketers, Test cricketers, at a time that they were Simpson, Tattersall and Watkins.
Who were that?
Was that?
Who were the top?
they were Reg Simpson,
Yes.
Roy Tattersall, and Alan Watkins.
Mhm.
And I went all connected with books that I was writing, but I remember them so well. The Cricketer actually, strangely enough, based on the fact that I've only just met him the once, asked me, think through Stephen Chalk, to do the obituary for Tattersall.
Mhm.
And they kept on mucking about with it. But anyway.
You also wrote a book on Watkins, right?
Yes, it was the very first book in the ACS series. When there was this moment when we had been producing those highly statistical books, now replaced really by Cricket Archive, with every innings that anybody played, scrupulously researched, scrupulously proofread, and almost agonizingly dull in the extreme detail. And the feeling was that series was running out of steam. And I remember, as I think chair of the association at the time, saying that we could do with a few biographies of people who hadn't had one, but merited perhaps a shorter one, not the full length. And the original thought was that it was run to about 30,000 words. Actually, they've all run to a great deal more than that. I think that Smith would have been past 50,000, and some less worthy people had even more than that. And I think, although Mike Smith would describe the series as for sort of covering the second layer of players, I think he was by no means in the second layer. But Watkins, I think it would be fair to say, did fall nicely into that niche. And I had written a book for Fairfield, for Stephen Chalk, at his sort of behest, on Don Shepherd. And my first sort of player that I interviewed was Jim McConnell. And my word, that was hard work. His mind was almost totally detached from the world in which we lived, and he had fanciful ideas of who was still the secretary and things. He told me one or two lovely stories of how he was off to India, and suddenly a little brown parcel arrived from Roy Tattersall, said, "Here, you might find my whites useful." But when I then went from Jim McConnell to Alan Watkins, I found he was a wonderful source of information, opinions, and the rest of it. And he was a very natural choice for me in a series that I think I was actually responsible for suggesting the title Lives in Cricket. And I suggested that title so that it could embrace administrators, umpires, other people, journalists who had delivered a life to it. In practice, of course, it's nearly all players. And it's sort of run out of steam a bit now with the ACS, but I think it had a lovely place and I've certainly got the first 50 in the series, despite sizing down after moving house. Something David could never do. Now I'm in this Aladdin's cave of cricket memorabilia.
No, I'm afraid that's gone. All the bats, the balls, historic balls, they've all gone. I have to get rid of them. I don't have any grandchildren.
Yes.
But
yes.
The library is still pretty well there.
It's the library that's taken my eyes.
About 6,000 books and thousands of magazines. And the heartbeat of it is the letters. I think there are about 700 letters there. Was it 7,000?
I wish I'd kept some letters that I've had, but I'm not a memorabilia man actually at all. No. And I don't think I've ever lived in a house that would have had room for any memorabilia.
Well, I had to build on to accommodate this lot. And I'm glad I did, because collecting was such a joy over all those years.
Yes.
But the heartbreak comes when you're having to dispose of most of it. Like a ghost on my screen there, picture of me with the WS.
Who's organised that? Does that just come?
It was, I think it was a Playfair annual dinner. This is my screensaver. That's Hurstville Oval, where I grew up. The St George ground where Bradman played, and Ray Lindwall, Norm O'Neill, my captain.
And that's back in the days when the umpires had short coats only in Australia, and they were down to their ankles in this country.
Yeah.
With Trilby hat on and that sort of thing.
Yes, we got over 100 letters from Don Bradman.
Whoa.
What lovely writing he's got, hasn't he?
Yeah, he would not be at all amused if he heard that I was publishing the contents. I'm weighing it up. Nothing can harm him now. There's nothing in the letters that would harm him. He had some very strong opinions, very strong opinions.
Yes, yes.
In fact, he was never wrong, and we argued every time we met. It was about the no ball law. He wanted to go back to the front foot no ball law.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
sorry, the other way around. He wanted a back foot. I said,
That's right. Yes.
Don, you can't have.
And he thought there was a case for saying if you're
fading.
hit outside the off stump and it's going to hit the stumps, you're out. I think I'm right in saying.
I said, you can't have bowlers bowling off 18 yards. That's what Raw was doing. I played against Raw. Unfortunately, I didn't get to face him. He's the most terrifying bowler I'd ever seen.
Really?
Because he was a giant and he skidded in on that back toe cap and plonked his foot well in front of the popping crease. And he's virtually bowling off 18 yards. But of course, the cynic said...
Gordon Rourke?
Gordon Rourke was a giant of a man, 6'6" or 7.
Wow.
And a huge girth. And he'd rock in and then go up on his back foot. And that right toe dragged about 4 feet. So by the time the left foot came down, he was about 20 yards away from you. He's terrifying. I watched him and I played in a grade match against him. Unfortunately, I didn't get to face him because I think my cowardice would have been revealed to all. But, and then Mekif, Ian Mekif, another lovely bloke, but he was a chucker.
But wasn't Rourke
bent like this? And it was obvious. But it took him years to eventually hound him out of the game.
Wasn't Rourke thought it was a chucker as well? That was in as well as Mekif, as besides the dragging. Or have I got that wrong?
In addition to a dragger, I'm inclined to think he was. I've stopped short of an absolute opinion on that, but because the arm came over so quickly.
Yeah, that's always
a terrifying, lovely bloke.
And they did have others, didn't they? Slater.
They're all over the place.
Yes.
2 South Australians were called
Throwaway or
Hitchcocks and Trethui.
Oh, right.
Right, yes.
Trethui and Pitchcocks. There were traditionalists who were prepared to try to expose them, ridicule them. As usual, it took quite a while for cricket to come to grips with it. But thank goodness the throwing controversy is history now.
It's become highly scientific, hasn't it, with umpires reporting people rather than calling no ball.
I went to Lord's to look at all their film. I think I might have been when I was writing The Fast Men. And they had cameramen hidden behind bushes all over the country, filming all the county bowlers, and 1 or 2 test men too, who were under suspicion.
Yes.
I think a few of them were nudged aside or warned. But if you're a thrower, you're usually unaware of it.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I've played 60 years of cricket, and I've found several blokes, including my own eldest son, who chucked, but they didn't know it. They looked at me as if I was mad when I said, "Your elbows."
Can I just, on that topic, ask you? I mean, I saw a test match at Old Trafford with the bowling opened by a man who passed his 90th birthday the other day, Harold Rhodes. And, of course, all the Derbyshire people swear blind that he didn't throw. Have you got any sort of feelings about that? I thought it was a lovely action. When I saw it, I thought this is quite something.
Yeah, I saw him bowl, but I can remember thinking, "Ooh, I wouldn't condemn him outright."
No.
Now, I think the umpires, if they had any doubt at all,
well, I know that they asked.
They call them out.
They asked opinion of eminent cricketers of the day, who happened to be MJK and Mickey Stewart, and the two of them firmly disagreed about the matter. I can't remember which one said it was a good action and which one said it was the other, but that just sort of struck me as how difficult that is. I mean, I've done a lot of umpiring at a lower level, and
Mickey Stewart knew the game inside out.
Yes.
That would be an opinion that had great validity.
Yes, very good. You haven't dried up, have you, David? You haven't dried up from talking, have you?
No, no.
What would you like to know, Russ? What would you like? Have you got any other things to throw into the pool?
Oh yeah, quite a few actually. Before I got to compliment Douglas again on his memory. I looked up the Andy Sandham triple century, and you're absolutely right. It was right after a tour of New Zealand. So
the tour was going on. The two tours were going on at the same time, I think.
okay,
It was a bit ridiculous, really.
okay, I got it
And
down.
so there was some
Yes, right. They were for
fairly
February.
cheap
Absolutely.
tests.
Yes.
There were some fairly cheap test caps as a result.
Mm. No, yeah, that's right. This is Frindle's book. So yeah, they played New Zealand on the 17th of February, and then West Indies on the 21st of February.
Yes, there we are. I'll tell you a complete aside. The daughter of an England captain had her 80th birthday only last week. I bet you can't guess who the England captain is.
Oh, I forgot to send a card. No.
The answer is, believe it or not, F.L. Fane.
Who?
F.L. Fane, going right back, Fred Fane, who never played for England in this country, but played abroad. And in fact, Captain Jack Hobbs, I think, in his first ever test match in Australia. I think that's right. But he decided to hold off having children till after the war, which means that my friend was born sort of in 1946, I suppose, and he was at the time in his 70s.
Life goes on.
Yeah, one thing I was going to. You mentioned the start of one-day cricket. My recollection was that the Cavaliers were playing on Sundays, because I remember loving watching those, and they seemed to me that after that the Gillette Cup and various things came.
The Gillette Cup preceded the Cavaliers.
It did.
The Gillette Cup, but the Gillette Cup was just a knockout, and it brought in the minor counties, which was good for them. And the Cavaliers would have been going, in my view, about 1966-67, immediately preceding 68, which was the start of the John Player League, which were quarter-over matches played on Sundays with sometimes no appalling travel requirements. Two teams playing up in Headingley, and one of them would have to go down to Southampton to play on Sunday and come back to resume the match on Monday at Headingley. And that happened quite often, I think. In the days, of course, also when the motorway system wasn't up to much. And,
my dear friend John Arlott was doing commentary on the Sunday matches, and his problem was he kept falling asleep. And he was very professional, very conscientious. It horrified him, but they had to have someone sitting next to him to jolt him if he's showing signs.
Yes. It's one of my regrets I never met him. I've met a lot of the commentators.
He was a father figure to me.
Jonathan Agnew's grandmother and my father were friends at the age of about 5. And Agnew's grandmother lived to 103. 110. So that's something we have in common.
Thanks for that reminder of the progression of the one day. What triggers in my mind is I'm pretty sure, Douglas, you wrote a book about Jack Bond. And
yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah, and so I'm from Lancashire, and so. In that era, Jack Bond was a real hero, and the Lancashire team was so good under his captaincy at the one-day game, and they weren't bad at the proper game either.
Yes, it was more mixed in the first-class game. But he inherited a side that was a real mess, that were people who were sort of fighting each other and, running their mates out, as it were, to make sure that they stayed on the staff rather than the other chap. So Jack told me. But they had huge respect for Jack because he had captained them in the second 11, people like David Lloyd, Barry Wood, those sorts of people, Ken Shuttleworth, and who were to be great sort of pillars of the sides that did so well. And I think also it was early doors for the short form game, and not everybody was taking it that seriously, in the same way as people did not take T20 seriously when it first came out. I mean, I can remember people like Nick Knight saying that the feeling was that this was surely just a bit of a giggle, you know. And it's far from that now. It's the source of all revenue, it seems.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to explore a little bit with you both. Is as David has already mentioned his love of not just Test cricket but the Ashes, and
Yes.
and I'm totally with you on all of that. I just wonder. I just like your opinions on how you see things developing with, exactly as you said, Douglas, the so-called white ball game now taking over. Plus, as David had talked about earlier, the proliferation of nations that are involved, many of whom get very, very poor crowds to test matches.
And something I read today, I think it was today, if it wasn't yesterday, in the Times, was an article pointing out that one of the culprits in this is Australia, because Australia simply haven't played any of these teams. It was big news that they were playing Bangladesh for the first time for something like 21, if it wasn't 31 years. They've never played Ireland, Afghanistan, or anything like that. And it was quite a good article in a way that it opened my eyes to the fact that England actually have done their stuff of playing the other countries to a much greater extent. But it took ages before the Australians played New Zealand on a serious basis. And they've sort of followed that pattern as the other countries have emerged. And that makes the future of Test cricket harder for those countries. So the suggestion in this article was that the Cricket Australia were paying lip service to Test cricket, but not doing their bit to help the thing out. I mean, I certainly wonder how you can justify playing Test cricket in front of nobody. And that's such a contrast from having gone to West Indies at the time that Lara made his 375, which I saw, and I saw the previous match at Barbados where Atherton and Stewart put on 170 after England had been bowled out 45 in the previous match, I think, or something like that. And the fight for seats. I mean, you had to have taken proper precautions to ensure you had a seat. Now, if you go out there, the grounds are largely empty, apart from the travelling parties from England, if England are playing there. Sad.
I just read that actually Australia has about 20 test matches coming up in the next 12 months, including, as you mentioned, the tour of Bangladesh. But David, what have you got any reaction to that?
Well, I thought ICC dictated to one and all, and we know who runs the world game now. That's India. But I suspect that if India started leaning heavily on Australia, they'd cop a left hook. I hope so, anyway.
Yes, oh dear.
Yeah, actually, but you started to broach a topic that's sort of on my list that I wanted to make sure I got your views on before we end the interview, and that is, to me, the sad demise of West Indian cricket. It's not just merely the great team of the 80s and 90s that was all conquering. But prior to that, I grew up in Lancashire, and the local league teams were peppered with West Indian characters. The great Garfield Sobers played for Radcliffe, which is like 5 miles from where I live. And so I'm perplexed. So why it has fallen off a cliff like that? Maybe it's coming back. Do you have any suggestions as to what happened there?
Well, I would say, I mean, at club level, one is acutely aware that for want of a better word, Asian cricketers, largely Pakistanis, I would suggest, but the Pakistanis and the Indians at club level don't particularly mix. And very few Caribbean players or players of Caribbean heritage. And I think there's that scholarly book that's been produced. The author's name is eluding me, but he did address the Cricket Society, certainly. And
Macmillan, right?
Yeah. No, not Macmillan.
No.
Anyway, the point that he made, I think, was that it meant everything to the first generation that came over here, and they still felt a loyalty to West Indies. Now, the next generation, born in this country, where is their loyalty? In many cases, they chose to play for England. But as time has gone on, we've gone through that sort of generation when we had people like Gladstone Small and Darren Malcolm and Chris Lewis and others. So there are very much fewer now knocking around the county game. And I suppose the one big exception is Jofra Archer. But he's not, I think, brought up in this country. He came over from West Indies, I think. I could be wrong about that.
Well, England has been by far the number one country for playing imports. Some of them are fair dinkum. I mean, they were born here, Australian, West Indian parents, or they came here as kids. But I'm a bit worried about those who come in their maturity and just jump into the England side.
Yes, that's an interesting one. Yes. I don't know how long they have to qualify. I mean, I think it was 4 years, wasn't it?
The bloke who's opening the bowling now with the earrings.
Archer is.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's not been here a long time, but long enough.
Yes, and I think Chris Jordan would have been one sort of immediately before.
Well, the question of origins has always fascinated me. There was a chap who made 100 in the very first Test match. His name was Bannerman, and he was born over in England, but he made his 100 for Australia. A chap I wrote a book about, Archie Jackson, who died at 23. He was born in Scotland.
Right.
And if you go through all the Test players, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of them,
yes,
quite a number were born somewhere else.
Yes.
So I remember a friend of mine said, "What does it matter where you're born?" He said, "You don't know about any of these things while you're a baby." And I said, "Yeah, I've got to give you that. But at what point do you cease to become an allegiance to where you were born or where you later emigrate?"
I mean, there were people who had a choice about this.
Who?
Gordon Greenwich, I think, could have played for England if he'd chosen to do so.
Yeah. There are quite a few of them who had the choice. I think I applaud Gordon for sticking with his natural territory, native territory.
Well, Jacob Bethell could play for them, couldn't he? He could play for West Indies. Jacob Bethell could. It's cuts both ways.
Well, Archie Jackson was the role model, really. He played for Australia, but he was a Scot by birth. The first batsman was, if we didn't mention it earlier, Charles Bannerman.
Yes. His only century, wasn't it?
The world has shrunk since then.
Yes.
And, more and more people are moving. So you have to trust the people who run the game to get it right about opportunism.
I mean, you talk about the game shifting. Now, of course, everybody flies in and out everywhere. They used to get on a ship and get to know each other and have a good time for 6 weeks on the way out there and gone for the whole winter, not flipping back because the wife's pregnant or something.
I guess just as sort of a concluding question, just for it's sort of obvious, but something I'd be dying to ask. Who are your favorite cricketers? Now, in my mind, it doesn't necessarily mean the best. There are cricketers I, as a kid, liked that weren't the best, but I liked something about them.
I suppose, like yourself, I think, I'm from the Northwest. I lived in Cheshire, and I trundled down the Cheshire line to what was then called Warwick Road. I mean, you had to be a great admirer of Brian Statham, especially if, like me, you were determined to bowl as fast as you could, and having switched the brain off in my case. And I was at Old Trafford for the famous occasion on which Yorkshire were, I think, something like 19 for 4. And Statham had got 3 of them, if I remember correctly, and had twice fallen flat on his face. And on the basis of that sort of spell, he was thought good enough to fly out as a replacement to Australia. And I suppose if you then said in the broader sweep, I think our generation always had a soft spot for Tom Graveney because he made his runs so attractively, for all the fact that he had his ups and downs. And in later life, I got to know him quite well. He was one of the most helpful people if you wanted to chat about the game for a book or whatever. And the first time I got in touch with him, he immediately said he must come down to my golf club. And so I had a soft spot for him.
So, David, do you want to volunteer players that particularly you liked over your long career?
Oh, well, it began with Ray Lindwall, whose action I emulated to the T at half his pace, and Len Houghton. Just prior to that, I went to Sydney as a boy in 1949. My first Ashes series there was 50-51. So Len Houghton, Compton had a terrible series there, but Len Houghton was in magnificent shape and he became a number one hero. But the complication was that I idolised Ray Lindwall, Australia's fast bowler. He used to give me a lift home after the Test match at Sydney. Jerry, hop in, he said. You know, I tried to get him talking about the day's play, and all he wanted to talk about was Botany Bay and where the first settlers landed over there and this, that and the other.
Talking about jumping into taxis, I remember hearing Len Houghton saying how he found himself sharing a taxi with Ray Lindwall and how awkward he found this.
Yes, he would. And when Ray's bowling to Len, I couldn't watch. I couldn't walk. I was shaking like a leaf. But got to know them both very well later in life. It was wonderful to have the privilege of knowing them and to know what made them tick. And across the years, I've known hundreds of players, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, because asking for an autograph is one thing, but actually getting to know someone. When Debbie and I used to go back to Queensland every year, we got very pally with Bill Johnson, with a T. Johnson, he was a fund of laughs, and he's a brilliant bowler, but you don't hear his name much these days. I think he took about 180 Test wickets, which was a lot then. What he would have done to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, I never know. But yes, but Bill Johnson was a move on to Frank Tyson, because we formed a trio, all living on the Gold Coast in Sydney, in Queensland. And Frank Tyson was a heavily built man. He's the fastest bowler I've ever seen, on a par with Houldin. And of course, he destroyed Australia in 54-5. But we used to drive up to the mountains along the curling road through the mountain. And Frank was clumsy with his right foot, and he'd hit the brakes, and we'd all fly forward. And he'd whiz round the bend and straighten out. Then he'd accelerate, then he'd hit the curve. It was a curse being driven by Frank Tyson, and I didn't even bat it. Well, I did bat against him in the nets. He's bowling off 6 paces, so I was still afraid. Wonderful bowler. I wonder how often his name crops up in modern times, because he wasn't around all that long, but he was a sensation.
He was.
And come to that, I did a book on fast bowlers once, and I couldn't believe the amount of absolutely top fast bowlers there have been. So many that they all die in each other's spotlight, I suppose. Ask any young cricket lover, what do you know about Charles Courtright? He might say, let me just look it up. And of course, he never played a test match, so how could he come into the conversation? But anyone who faced him reckoned he was red hot, the fastest of his generation. Forget Tom Richardson and Bill Lockwood.
Yes. Well, I do know that it has always impressed me that the many people from that generation who I've spoken to, who are good batsmen in the county game or for England, said that Tyson was the one name that always came up as the fastest bowler that they had encountered or seen.
But it was such a short spell. But
yes, he did.
He gave everything in those few years.
I must just say that I know without any doubt the fastest bowler I ever faced. And it was in a village match, and it was West Indian. And the pitch was somewhat underprepared, and the ball was, no helmets or anything, the ball was really flying around. And I had no idea who this was until years later.
Yes.
I discovered that someone said, oh, he'd played for Antigua under-19s opened the bowling with Andy Roberts. He said Andy Roberts was far the better bowler, but this chap was a bit quicker.
Mm-hmm. Who was he?
Oh gosh, now you're I'm afraid it's just slipped my memory what his name was. But I don't think he got beyond village cricket. His club cricket. He's well known in the Berkshire sort of area, I think. Certainly I can remember it. It was at Maple, Durham.
Yes, I wrote a book on the fast men, and I felt quite bruised at the end of it. It was followed by the slow men, which was a much more enjoyable experience.
I can believe it, yes.
Because they tended, on the whole, to be more academic, more humane.
More complex, I would think.
Yes, it's probably a handicap if you're a soft-natured, humane man who's trying to bowl fast.
Yes, yes. As an umpire, I've sometimes felt with a bowler at club level, the trouble with you is you don't frighten me. You know, you don't make me think, crikey, he must think that's out with the ferocity of his appeal. I think you do get some lovely, gentle giants.
Yeah.
One of them is actually the son of Stuart Rogers, S.S. Rogers, who captained Somerset in about 1950-ish. And I think I've said to him, you'll never make it unless you have a more aggressive personality. Sorry, I mean, I drift into terribly unimportant trivia.
Oh, not really. I always understood that Tyson was quite academic. I think he...
yes.
What I read about him was I think he had a degree from some university and also taught. Am I wrong about that?
You're right about that, but it didn't stop him being unable to call Peter May Peter. He had to call him Skipper.
So Frank Tyson was a sort of academic. He taught at a grammar school in Melbourne. But I spent hours and hours and hours with him when we were neighbours, and I wouldn't, at the end of all that, regard him as an academic or as an intellectual even. Smart operator. But I don't know, you look through the ranks of fast bowlers, and I wrote a book about them once, and I think they've had a bad press. They're nearly all very nice chaps. And I've spoken to Harold Larwood, for instance, and he's so meek that he wondered, could this be the same chap who did what he did in 32, 33? Well, he certainly did, but of course he was bowling under instructions. There've been some thugs among them, and I think that's when it really is frightening. I can't remember his name, but there was one, or maybe I remember it, but if I had a lawyer, he'd say, don't utter his name. But there was one West Indian who was homicidal, and that was worrying because the umpires didn't do anything to stop it. And across the years, the umpires have a lot to answer for. Not many of them have got the courage to carry out their duties when it comes to that sort of thing. Jim Phillips, 100 years ago or more, was one who had the courage to no-ball several players who were a threat to the game. I love spin bowlers.
Okay, well, I think I'll conclude the session now. Thank you so much with spending your time with me on this. It's been a great pleasure for me, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so glad we managed to work out something through the complexity of the technology, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I just hope you'll edit out the trivia and nonsense that I may have spoken alongside the man who is certainly one of those I look up to in the game, the great David Frith.
Thank you, Douglas. Appreciate that. I won't get to sleep tonight. But,
thank you again.
Nice to be back with you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Okay.
I hope it works.